Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla Delgado for the UNEP, the UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program. I want to welcome you today. The role of governance and institutionality in the dynamic of the Paris Agreement and the implementation of the NDCs. This is part of the road to COP30 environment. Is there events organized by the IBC. This is an interagency platform that gathers more than 20 agencies of the United Nations in Latin America and the Caribbean working to streamline efforts and capabilities and support countries in the implementation of global agendas, the Paris Agreement, the 2030 Agenda, and the Sendai framework, among others. We are very passionate about working on the building of a sustainable future. We are joining the Mutirão, that is a Brazilian concept that fosters collective work, voluntary and solidarity, organizing to resolve common and shared challenges. In the climate context, Mutirão symbolizes the joint action of governments, civil society, and diverse stakeholders to co-create real solutions. The institutionality and climate governance are key pieces in the construction of collective work towards just transition. Without these solid frameworks, effective coordination, and without the ability to align these sectors, it will be very difficult to achieve concrete action. Today, we gather to further work on the recommendations of NDCs and public policies. I really thank you for your commitment, for your presence, for your engagement, and I want to give the floor to Andrea Campo-Nogara, Global Coordinator for the Regional Coordination Centers of the UNFCCC. Thank you very much, Carla, esteemed colleagues and friends. I would like to welcome you to this webinar. Hopefully, we will be able to talk about experiences, opportunities, and challenges faced by Latin America and Caribbean countries to strengthen climate governance and institutionality in the relevant context. I would like to start by thanking my colleagues at UNEP and also for the Climate Change and Resilience Coalition for the organization of these webinars towards COP30, focusing on collaborative approaches to walk towards resilience and climate mitigation. I want to thank the UNEP for organizing this event jointly with the UNFCCC RCC for Latin America and the Caribbean and the United Nations FAO. I want to highlight that the participants in this webinar have the opportunity to further understand the different levels of climate governance and institutionality to move forward in implementation of the UNFCCC. Also, we want to highlight the liaisons and relations with other stakeholders that are non-state stakeholders, for including the non-governmental organizations, the private sector, and the civil society. In addition, we have a great panel of experts to highlight this opportunity for the climate financing mobilization. I am sure that we're all aware that there's a need to have more innovative financing mechanisms for the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, considering the growing challenges related to our specific vulnerabilities. Monitoring the advancement of climate change action is key as the countries implement the reinforced or enhanced framework of transparency for their biennial transparency reports. And this is key for the strategy to strengthen governance and the role to foster financing of the NDCs. I have great expectations listening to the panels today, their experiences in the different countries to strengthen governance and climate institutionality at the local level. I encourage every participant to pay attention to these presentations, to the key messages, to the takeaways, and I also invite you to actively participate and to contribute to the dialogue. I hope this is a very fruitful webinar. Thank you, Andrea, for your words, for joining us in this space. Now we're going to start these presentations to discuss the dynamics of the NDC in our region. We'll start with Nadia Gonzalez from the UNFCCC team, who will share an overview of the international context and the opportunities for the commitments undertaken under the Paris Agreement. Thank you, Carla. I will be sharing a presentation. Thank you, Carla, for your presentation. I want to also thank Andrea Camponogara, that is our regional leader in the Secretariat. These are mirror offices. Next slide, please. I would like to provide you with a summary of the evolution of the climate regime at the international level. I want to talk about the adoption of the UNFCCC, that is the United Nations framework for the climate change. The Framework Convention for Climate Change, this UNFCCC, was the kickoff of the dialogue. But then we had COP30, from which the Kyoto Protocol stemmed for developed countries, with the goal of reducing in 5% the emissions vis-a-vis pre-industrial emissions. Then we had the Paris Agreement in 2015 with the goal of limiting the increase of global temperature and to keep it under 2 degrees Celsius, limiting it to 1.5. This is a timeline from the adoption of the UNFCCC, thinking also about the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement to face climate change. This is an overview of the global governance of climate change, how it's organized, who makes decisions, how these are translated into action. So we have the UNFCCC, as I mentioned, that sets the rules and the architecture of the governance, but this is led by the presidency of the COP that rotates annually and has the responsibility of facilitating agreements, articulating positions, and coordinating multilateral processes. The very same conference of the parties is where the final and definite decisions are made that define the general way in which the climate regime will move. Then we have the Kyoto Protocol. As I mentioned, it is a binding for developed countries to reduce emissions. And we have the CMAP that stands for the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. These bodies share a negotiation scenario, and they are based in the 2 pillars. There are the SUBSTA, that is the subsidiary body that for scientific and technological advice that promotes this type of knowledge for the decision-making process. And then we also have the SBI, that is the subsidiary body for implementation. These provides a framework for financing, for capability or capacity building, and transparency follow-up. Then we have other constituencies created by the COP, by the CMP, and the CMA. For instance, the Adaptation Committee, that is the AC, that provides a framework for technical and thematic work for the different implementations in the different countries. And then we have the Bureau that works together with the presidency to ensure logistics and coordinations. And then we have the Secretariat of the Climate Change, or for the UNFCCC. It has its seat in Bonn, Germany, that works as the administrative and technical engine within this system to make sure that the meetings take place, so that there is also the technical support for the decisions of the bodies to be implemented. Next, please. Well, now we can move on to the topic that gathers us here today. We know that the Paris Agreement is an international treaty that is binding. It was adopted in 2015 under the framework of the UNFCCC, and it sets forth the global framework to face climate change. These are the 5 main elements of the Paris Agreement. They are under its different articles. We have the long-term goals and the global efforts, that is under Article 2, with the global or the main objectives of the Paris Agreement. That we have the adaptation goal in Article 7, then the climate financing mobilization and the alignment of financing flows. These are under Article 2, but also it has a disaggregation in Article 9.3. Then we have national efforts of the different parties. We can talk about mitigation, adaptation, losses and damages, sinks and reservoirs, and also Article 6 for voluntary cooperation. We then have implementation means. These are in Articles 9, 10, and 11 in the Paris Agreement. The enhanced transparency framework, it is in Article 13. And then we have the global stocktake in Article 14 of the Paris Agreement. Next. Here we have the cornerstone of the Paris Agreement. These are the NDCs, the nationally determined contribution. They respond to the main objectives of the Paris Agreement in Article 2. They set forth a 1.5 limit for the temperature increase. Also, it has the call to increase the adaptation capability and resilience, and of course the coherent financing flows towards reducing GHG emissions and resilient development. We have a cycle for the NDCs. They respond to these Paris Agreement goals. The NDCs are updated every 5 years. They have to be guided by the implementation means. They have also national accountability. This accountability takes place through the BTRs, the biennial transparency reports. It is something that just took place, and they happen every 2 years to report on the implementation of the NDCs. In turn, they inform the global stocktake, the GST. These global stocktake reports take place every 5 years, and they guide the ambition towards fighting climate change. As I mentioned, we have the GST, the global stock take. The first global stock take took place during COP28 in the United Arab Emirates in 2023. We discussed the main messages in the progress of climate action, and we mentioned that NDCs have to deal with every greenhouse gas, and that they have to be aligned with the 1.5 goal of the Paris Agreement, that the developed countries have to lead the effort, adopting absolute goals for the reduction of emissions for the entire economy. The developing countries have to increase their efforts, their mitigation efforts, and also adopt these goals for taking into account the entire economy. And we have to encourage the parties to align their future NDCs with the long-term LEDs, and also to communicate their new NDCs in 2025. There was a deadline that was February 2025, but the Secretariat is now urging the parties to submit their NDCs before September 2025 so that they can be considered in the report that the Secretariat prepares before the COP30 to be carried out in Belém do Pará in Brazil. They have to be also presented under the ICTU, and the temporary frameworks for the implementation of these NDCs 3.5 has to be a 10-year implementation framework. In addition, there is a need to reflect how these NDCs will be implemented, taking into consideration the first GST, and also reflect the progress made in comparison with NDC 2.0. Next, under the global stock take call, if we address mitigation, we have to mention the area of renewable energies and energetic efficiency. There's a need to triple the renewable energy and duplicate energetic efficiency, also to reduce the CO2 emissions at the global level, including methane, CH4. Also, we have to think about transitioning outside of fossil fuels in energetic systems to achieve net zero emission, also to accelerate efforts towards energy systems with net zero emissions, also to eliminate gradually the inefficient subsidies of fossil fuels, accelerating the reduction of energies based in carbon without mitigation technologies, also to accelerate the reduction of emissions on road transport, accelerating the zero and low emission technologies, including renewables, nuclear, mitigation technologies, and capture technologies, and the production of low carbon hydrogen, also to preserve and restore nature and ecosystems, including those that are marine and terrestrial ecosystems, and to support the efforts to detain and revert the deforestation and degradation of the forest towards 2030. In addition, towards mid-century, we have to prepare more ambitious NDCs with goals to reduce towards net zero. Next, as to adaptation, we have to present the main gaps that could be fragmented responses, a lack of financing, effectiveness assessment, security related to food, water, health, and ecosystems, and reducing poverty and protecting cultural heritage. There is a need to call to action in a way that is urgent, incremental, transformative, and direct, and led by countries, also in a multi-sector way. We need to assess risks and climate vulnerability. We have to implement and update our national adaptation plans or NAPs, strengthen monitoring and evaluation systems. And when we talk about loss and damages, we need to limit the increase of temperature to reduce loss and damages, and also to improve the support to countries in development. In addition, as next steps, we need to evaluate climate risk and early alert systems, implement policies and NAPs to protect ecosystems and vulnerable communities. Next slide. For implementation means, we need to acknowledge that there is a need to duplicate the financing for adaptation, also a call to reform the multilateral financing architecture, and also to comply with the delivery of the 100 billion per year until 2025. As to technology, there are still gaps in the technology adoption. We need to improve the financial support and the development of capacities for countries in development, and to implement the work program for technology to strengthen the support to the developing countries' priorities. And as to capacity development, there are still gaps in the adoption of technology, and we have to improve the financial support and the development of capacity for the developing countries, and to implement the work program for the technologies to strengthen the support. Those are the main messages of the global stocktake, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor back to Paola. Nadia, this is very valuable information. Thank you. There are fans of your presentation in the chat. After this event, we will be sending these resources and links for them to be downloaded. Thank you for your presentation. The framework you provided is very important to understand what comes next. I want to give the floor to James Hazlitt. He's an expert in the climate collaboration of the UNEP. He will be talking about barriers, obstacles, and opportunities to strengthen the governance in the NDC implementation. James, the floor is yours. Thank you, Carla. Can you hear me? Yes, perfectly well. Hello, everyone. My name is James Hazlitt. I work here in the Copenhagen Climate Center for UNEP. I want to explain a little bit who we are. We are the technical center that is specialized in energy, climate, and sustainable development. We work here from the seat of the UN city in Copenhagen. There are like 10 UN agencies working together in this building in Denmark. This center has over 60 people working in projects that are global. These are our local offices. We have a steering committee led by UNEP and the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Denmark, which provide most of our financing for the project. And we're part of the new climate change division of UNEP. This presentation is based on the report that you see right here to the right. UNEP will soon presented as a result of Profits in Action, and it was financed by Germany. It has the goal of incentivizing action and increasing ambition to combat climate change. So between 2020 and 2024, we'll work with 10 countries, 3 of them from Latin America. There is Argentina, Colombia, and Costa Rica, with the goal of complying with their mitigation and adaptation commitments under the framework of the Paris Agreement. So it's very important to define the problem that we have to resolve first. It is very important to acknowledge that there's increasing climate investment, but that there are barriers outside the OECD countries, in particular when it comes to adaptation financing, and that there are other obstacles that include, for instance, a limited access to concessional financing, a deficient structuring of the project, and fragmented risk management. The needs of adaptation financing are very large. They are estimated in our CAP report analysis at almost $400 million per annum. And of course, national strategies end up in a context of very deep uncertainty. Subnational governments frequently lack resources and capabilities to plan and finance infrastructure that is climate resilient, and the mitigation efforts are affected by fragmented interventions and by a lack of prioritization of the investments and a lack of coordination. So these are key deficiencies. These are failures in the market, failures in coordination, and lack of prioritization. So these are the 3 main issues that we are addressing in our analysis under this framework. So we are defining the institutional triplet for the implementation of NDCs. We get inspiration from Mariana Mazzucato's work on the role of the state to develop a triple institutional framework, including a clear mission defining priorities, also a specialized public body for the structuring of projects, and a mixed financing fund for climate change. And the idea is to foster investment in climate change mitigation and adaptation through leadership and more solid institutional coordination. There is a clear lack of leadership and coordination by the state to implement NDCs, so that is the kickoff point to establish the mission, because first we need to set the purpose, that is to align governmental efforts and to achieve tangible climate results. The key functions are to establish and measurable objectives and to follow up on them, reducing emissions, having mobilized financing, then aligning the priorities of investment through the high-level coordination, also the use of incentives, that is prizes and sanctions to foster good development on performance, and also to work on transparent exchange of knowledge on climate, and also to foster investigation, research, and the innovation in the private sector. This is very relevant and it's part of the Mazzucato analysis. And there are 2 investment tools that are very important. In the case of the public body, It is very important to structure projects that are valuable for society, but that sometimes are not profitable. And also they need to use scarce public funds for high impact interventions, and also to allow for regional co-financing when there are low scale economies. Where there is a need for a combined or mixed financing fund. This is good to improve risk profiles, to attract investors, and also to have diverse funds at the local level, at the commercial level, and this is focused on projects for that may have a low carbon emissions that are climate resilient. This is a bit on the academic side, and it is related to NDC action. For instance, in Uganda, there is a need to foster mitigation and resilient projects that are aligned with the NDCs. This is developing countries, and it is focused on technologies like, for instance, solar energy, climate safe products, for instance, for banana producers and banana farmers. The fund that was designed under the framework of the program had the aim of reducing private investment in climate through the use of public funds, working on hybrid products and access to market, support to liquidity, and also fiscal incentives and fiscal exemptions, like added value income tax exemptions. The climate financing integration results report was presented last year, and in addition, there was support to the investment plan in Uganda in relation to NDCs. This is good to incentivize investments, something that is organized by UNEP, that is so-called is for clean technologies for cooking, and the focus here is the systemic collaboration of multiple stakeholders to implement the clean energy transition. That was the focus in this project in Uganda. It was a grassroots project that reached the level of the national framework. The features of the project are the following. We are working on sustainable materials. We have water gathering, rainwater gathering, and inclusive design with a gender and disability lens. These are dual purpose. These are family households, and also they work as anti-cyclone safe havens. As to impact, it is also useful to reduce evacuation need, and it is a response to the practical implementation of NDCs, and it also works as an expansion model in the coastal regions of Bangladesh. And as to financing, it was provided by ecological household funds within the Bangladesh Bank. We have another example in Morocco, in Africa. The goal was to align the NDC 3.0 with the net zero emissions in the long-term strategy that is up to 2050. Our idea was to use modeling tools that already exist to build sectorial scenarios and to also align the NDC measures for the planning of 2030 and to incorporate new policies and exclude those that are not aligned with a structured governance process. Key lessons are, or the key goals are to align this process in the long term and also with the coordination of the interested parties, the stakeholders in the ministries, the private sector, and the civil society, and also to plan the NDC implementation. Also to apply a consistent methodology for cost calculation and emissions, and also to establish revision or review cycles that are coordinated by the LT-LEDs and the NDCs. This was organized in Morocco. It was very innovative, with benefits that included providing a vision and a direction for the climate planning and the long-term development. Morocco was very well focused, and this created some space for future NDCs provisions aligned with climate investment. So that would be all for my presentation. I would like to give the floor back to Carla. Thank you, James. It's very interesting information. I would like to give the floor to Paola Herrera. She will be our moderator. She is the regional coordinator of the NDC Invest of UNEP. Thank you, Carla. Good morning, everyone. I want to to greet Eric Coral Pinto de Rocha, General Coordinator of the Mitigation Policies Department for the Brazilian government. He will be sharing the perspective and the overview of Brazil regarding institutional frameworks and the implementation of the NDCs. That is so interesting right now for the prioritization of the project portfolio. Erico, welcome. Thank you, Paola. Good morning, everyone. I will be sharing my screen now. Can you see my screen? Yes, perfectly well. Great. Thank you very much. I want to thank UNEP for organizing this webinar, for the invitation, also to the UNFCCC RCC. I think that Nadia and James' presentations were great. They give me a great background for my presentation, I am going to try to land it as much as possible. I think that there are two goals that are very important in Brazil. There's to explain how climate governance is in our country, and this was very important for the development of our NDC and also for other strategies. And also we want to talk about the BIP or BIP, that is the Brazil Investment Platform for climate projects. My presentation is written in English, but I will be speaking in Portuñol, that is a mixture of Portuguese and Spanish. So it's very important to have some context of the situation in Brazil. We have been working for 2.5 years in the environmental, the Ministry of the Environment to update our national policy on climate change. We have two challenges. In Brazil, it's very important to take into consideration that we're a very large country. We have about 5,000 municipalities, out of which almost 3,000 have very low adaptation capability. And there is an increase. We are working on keeping the 1.5-degree goal, but we have some areas that are 3 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So it's a very huge challenge for us. It's extreme, it's very serious. You can see that 83% of the municipalities in Brazil are already impacted by climate change. You have been witnesses of the tragedy in Rio Grande do Sul, near the border with Argentina. There were very large financial impacts, but even larger when it comes to people's lives. When we talk about adaptation, Brazil is among the largest GHG emitters in the world, and its mix is very different. It has emissions. Most of the countries have emissions disaggregated, as you can see it on the left. But in the case of Brazil, most of the emissions are related to the use of land, the LULUCF. And, well, if you take a look at the green bars, we have LULUCF emissions, that is land use change and forestry. Nonetheless, we have to bear in mind that there are other sectors that are also growing. So we signed our 2025 NDCs and the 2030 NDCs, but I would like to talk about the NDCs that we presented in COP29 in Azerbaijan, Baku last year. It's important to say that we don't have a long-term strategy developed yet, an LTS, but we carried out an economic modeling for our NDCs. And this model was a whole economy model, and it looked at the most cost-effective way to lead with climate change towards 2050. Our NDCs were developed in line with the 2050 goals. As to governance in Brazil, under President Lula's mandate, we reactivated an interministerial committee for climate change. So at the strategic level, we have an interministerial committee on climate change, that is a CIM, and this is no longer a policy-only strategy. there is an economic development model as well. So we have the cabinet of the republic, the cabinet of the presidency, that is included in the executive committee, subcommittee. And we also have Marina Simon within this committee as well, and we have all the sectors included. We have livestock, mining, industry, but we also have a representation of the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Finance. So all these documents, the NDCs, are dealt with at the ministerial level. But you can imagine how difficult it is to have all these representatives meet. But we have also a level of vice ministers or secretariats. We have the SUBEX, that is the executive subcommittee, and a subcommittee for the preparation towards COP30. This is also at the executive level, and we have three chambers. We have an interfederative articulation chamber. We can address this if there's room for a Q&A, because it's very important to consider the challenges at this level. And we have a social participation chamber, and also we have another chamber that is related to the substep, that is for scientific advisory. And at the technical level, that is where I am located, there is a series of work for different topics. We have a legislation, we have this structure, but there's something very important, that is our national climate change policy and our climate plan. We want to work on a 12-year climate plan, that is 2024 to 2030. This includes 3 NDC update cycles, and also 3 budget planning cycles, that is every 4 years in Brazil. So we have a mitigation and an adaptation element with their own strategies, providing guidelines, and also sectoral adaptation plans. So we have sectoral mitigation plans and sectoral adaptation plans with the different sectors on each side. We have 7 in the area of mitigation and 16 in the area of adaptation. So we have environment, science and technology for the UNFCCC, and this was very interesting in this structure, because these 3 ministries provide us with technical, political, and coordination guidelines, but the sectorial ministries have their own plans. For instance, in the case of energy and mining plan, this was led by the Ministry of Energy and Mining. In the case of cities, we had the Ministry of the Cities leading their own plan. And this happened with a great level of social engagement and public consultation. There are 30 days allowed for these type of activities, including workshops, and all of these sectoral mitigation plans went through public consultation stages, and we're working on the area of sectoral adaptation plans as well, so we can be ready for COP30. And in addition, we have cross-cutting strategies for climate action, just transition, environmental and socioeconomic impact, and we want to also have them undergo public consultation during COP30.
This follows the mandate, as Nadia was saying, of the Paris Agreement, of being a bit more ambitious. And in Brazil, we don't have a condition NDC. That is important. But there's also a range, a margin in this target Both are more ambitious than the previous one, but always with the ideas the incerteza or incertidumbre be capitalized. These uncertainties need to be capitalized. So in these last 5 minutes, I'm going to move to a concrete example of how projects are prioritized and how that government, that work that was done before every sectoral agreement has its own targets with timelines, indicators, and I want to show you how that helped us in building our BIP or BIP, the Brazilian project platform. And that platform was an idea heavily promoted by the G20, by the Brazilian presidency, and that is the work we are currently doing. So the idea of this Brazilian investment platform, and I'm going to go over these slides very quickly because I just want to convey the general idea of that. We have a governance of the Ministry of Finance, Mines and Energy, climate change, industry. So that is all the different ministries that are relevant with their own specific initiatives and plans. They all aligned under Plano Plima, and as the secretary of the platform, this is a very important lesson because the Bendes, as platform secretarial lead, is very strong, and we're all working on building the platform. The notion of the platform is very similar to that idea that has been going around a lot, that has to do with connecting the points between these financial initiatives, projects, and with the government. That is why the government needs to guarantee that all initiatives selected are in line with the government's initiatives, plans, and strategies. And so that is the idea, that locus for debate. This is just for you to have a more thought of idea of the governance steering committee with a strategic goal with the different ministries, the secretariat. And that is a series of networks of working groups, financial institutions, with all project proponents, the different ministries to carry out these initiatives. The three priority areas in our platform are very much aligned, not only with the needs of our country of reducing emissions, but also sectoral initiatives. So there's energy, industry, and mobility, and nature-based solutions. Those would be the most important sectors. And of course, we also have the benefits of the adaptation in many of these sectors, particularly in CIPEN, but they're all working in order to include adaptation across all sectors of the platform. So my presentation is almost over. I'm running out of time, but I also wanted to share that this initiative began last year, and we already have some concrete outcomes. This is public information. It is in our website. There are 15 approved projects in the Brazilian investment platform, totaling 22.5 billions of dollars of potential investments in these priority sectors. And if you have a look at this slide, you'll see that we have a pretty varied range of investments, low carbon, hydrogen, low emissions. And as we said, we're talking about millions of dollars here, and there are other projects for the recovery of native vegetation that is also of paramount importance for our NDC commitments, because if we want to reduce our emissions, particularly farm and cattle emissions by 2050, we need to work extensively on restoring our forests. That is why we have these projects that are at a lower standard of resources. So we need to take into consideration that the Brazilian investment platform does not manage resources, but the idea is to keep on improving these projects, prioritize them, make sure that they are strategic for the government, provide support for project developers and for financial decisions in order to make sure that the project may eventually get those investments, but there is no allocated, no money or no funding allocated by the BIP or BEP. So this platform is already up and running. We have these projects that have been pre-selected. We're working on the different model in order to select the project, the specific challenges of each project, because every project requires specific financial solution and specific capital mobilization so that they can get to the final investment decision. And I also wanted to share something about our future work. This is internal work of developing different venture capital alternatives for future work in partnership with multilateral investment banks, and also leveraging on Brazilian government investment and funding alternatives in order to conduct a benchmarking of these projects and to make sure that the projects are prioritized in the Brazilian investment platform. And here we have the different working groups for each of the topics. It is also worth noting that here in Brazil, we are conducting a review of the country's program for the Green Climate Fund, and every private project needs to be in line and be on the roadmap for the Brazil investment platform, because it is the platform that will guide all investment decisions. That is all on my part. Thank you very much. And I hope that my Portuguese was easy to understand. Thank you. Thank you very much, Erico. That was actually great. I love that idea of a partnership. And that is something that I would like to underscore about your presentation, all your experience, how you've been able to articulate, become aligned, and have such a clearly defined governance structure with the involvement of all stakeholders. Congratulations on your work. We would like to have much more time to take a deeper dive into that. But precisely for that, not only did we want to invite Enrico that is present here today, but also another group of panelists and lecturers that I would like to invite to our next session, where we are going to be having a very quick panel, taking a deeper dive into the experiences across the region, in the different areas of the region, particularly in everything related to climate institutions and governance. And in addition to Enrico, I would like to invite Serenio Oroz. Please turn on your cameras. Serenio Orozco is from the Ministry of Climate of Panama. He is with us today, along with Claudia Liana Merchan, that is the Deputy Director of Risk Management at the Directorate of the Environment at the National Planning Department of Colombia, and Fernando Salazar de Lara, who's the Climate Coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean for UNED PEFAR. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us today. And without further ado, we are going to kick off this panel. Since Enrico has finished his presentation, in terms of timing, we have 20 minutes for the panel. And we are going to be organized as follows. I have a couple of questions prepared for every one of you that I'm going to ask as I call you. The idea is for you to share a little bit about your experience and elaborate on our questions. So if any of the participants should have any specific questions that they would like to ask, of course, you can write it down on the chat, and we're going to be keeping an eye on that so that we can ask those questions. And if there's time at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. If there's no sufficient time, we are going to be attempting to answer most of them in the email that we're going to be sending after the meeting. Enrico, leveraging on that experience in Brazil that you've just shared with us, I have two specific questions for you. First of all, in terms of consistency of the NDC and national plans, how are you working to guarantee consistency and alignment with NDC? Are there any formal mechanisms for that purpose? And I would like to hear a little bit more about your challenges, because I'm pretty sure that you've had challenges that you need to overcome in order to get to that institutional structure that you've just shared with us. So how did you achieve that level of interconnection across all different ministries involved and the cabinet of climate action that you showed? So can you elaborate upon that? Sure. Thank you very much, Paola. So I have 5 more minutes to answer those questions, and after that, I need to move to another meeting. But after that, I'm going to be available if you have any further questions. Let me start with the second question you asked. I believe that's something important that I have not yet mentioned, which is not new to other countries because Chile is already doing it in the region, the UK is doing it also in Europe. But in that work we conducted on climate and in the sectoral mitigation plans, we have for the very first time introduced mitigation targets for every one of the sectors. So the 5 inventory sectors were subjected to certain adaptations in order to turn them into 7. The 7 that are in line with the sector plans, and we have specific targets for every one of them. We have our NDC as an international commitment. But since that is at the international level, that involves the ministries, that is looking outwards, but we also need a strong national development, and every ministry is going to have specific targets looking inwards. That format helped us get the buy-in from the different ministries. And in addition to that, there's the leadership of science and technology, environment, the cabinet, but no one knows better their priority actions, their challenges, their technology issues than the specific sector ministry. So we're living upon them to build the plans, even using their specific fora. So agriculture and cattle raising has a lot of fora that they are already using for every one of the discussions, and after that they can bring those discussions and recommendations to the ministry they represent. So that'd be my answer to the first question. Now, as for the second question, and that is also a pretty important challenge in Brazil, and we have a lot of experience in the region. We've sought to learn from Chile and Argentina, for instance, from Colombia, in terms of the involvement of subnational jurisdictions. That is a pretty significant challenge in Brazil, not only because of the surface of the country, which is very large, but also because of the regional differences. We have São Paulo, where all emissions come from the industries, and then we have other states with deforestation and cattle raising. So we have 27 states in the federation, but in addition to that, there are 5,700 municipalities. So the institutional and constitutional differences are extremely complex, and therefore the federal government might do a couple of things, but there are many others that are private to the states, for instance, halting deforestation, and many others that have to do with the municipalities, such as public transportation, fleet electrification, etc. So we have 2 parallel solutions. On the one hand, the national strategies, both for mitigation and adaptation, that provide the guidelines for the adaptation and mitigation plans at state and national level. Then there's a governance structure with a federative articulation chamber with the federal government and all municipalities in order to discuss these ideas. And with the Green Climate Fund, we're also working on the development of adaptation plan across 500 municipalities in Brazil. So we want all of these to evolve with the aid and coordination of the federal government to guarantee that all priorities are in line. And for mitigation, some states in Brazil already have a state mitigation plan, but we want to revise those plans and keep on making progress, particularly in those states that still don't have one. And that is all articulated in the monitoring and transparency strategy that we're currently developing. So I believe that that is my response. Thank you very much, Ariko. So we'll take your recommendations to involve everyone from the highest level of government and also subnational governments in order to be able to build jointly. Thank you very much for being here today. We know that you need to leave us, but thank you very much for being with us today. Once again, thank you to this space. And if we have any questions, we will forward them to you so that we can answer to our audience. Thank you very much. Have a fruitful debate. Right now, I want to invite Claudia Liliana from DNP in Colombia. In Colombia, you've made quite a lot of progress in climate funding and monitoring. There is also the monitoring, reporting, verification, and finance system. So, can you tell us a little bit about the experience of this climate finance corridor in Colombia? How has it been to get other sectors involved, and how you managed to achieve this intersectoral and intergovernmental coordination to achieve NDC targets, and what are the mechanisms that you've promoted in order to guarantee effective governance in the implementation of these NDCs? Go ahead once again. Welcome. Can you hear me? We can hear you perfectly. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Pao. Thank you to the organizers of this webinar. I believe that these spaces are extremely important in order to be able to exchange experiences as countries in terms of the international commitments in the field of climate change. And I'm going to go backwards. So, first of all, there is governance and institutions that were created with different laws underpinned by national laws, as I was saying, that allow us to articulate, but also through the National Development Plan, we may actually further disseminate disaster risk and climate change plans. As I said, we have an institutional structure, and the highest authority is the SIC, which is our highest authority with two large groups. So one is regional and some other institutional groups. And among them, we're part of the financial committee that we lead all the progress and articulations in terms of resource mobilization in order to achieve the targets set out in the NDC. Now, specifically about the initiatives we're leading through these laws that we've enacted, we are leading the National Strategy for Climate Financing, and we have two main priority instruments that are the ones you mentioned: the system of monitoring, reporting, and verification, and the climate financing corridor. So, in the monitoring, reporting, and verification system, what do? That is a system that allows us to track all resources, and it also allows us to monitor, report, verify the resources that we are allocating to climate financing. And we may classify and rate the information related to public, private, and international investments. Right now, we are in the process of updating our methodology, particularly in connection with the UN transparency framework in order to attain all the international standards. But there is one more challenge for us as a country, because we want to make progress in attaining our goals, obtain further financing, and know exactly where we are investing our resources. For instance, there are some data that I wanted to share with you. The monitoring, reporting, and verification system since 2011 to 2023 has tracked that we invested $13.57 million, out of which 46% went to adaptation, 30% to joint mitigation and adaptation actions, and 24% to mitigation. That allows us to identify the progress we've made in attaining the NDCs and those areas that require greater focus. Additionally, the system has allowed us to identify the different financing accounts. We have domestic, public, private, and international. And we can say that 35% of resources are domestic public resources. That indicates that we need to attract further investments by the private sector. We need to get them to invest in climate change issues, but we also need to be able to monitor and track the private investments in the field. With the privates, it's a little bit easier, but with the privates, we need to strengthen our monitoring tools. In addition to that, 17% is international investment. So international is above public. What does it mean? It means that we're getting strong help from a multilateral organizations. And I also wanted to talk about climate financing corridor, and that is actually something that allows us to supplement these climate projects with financement sources that operates in three pillars. First, demand and needs that are represented by the project of the business sector, territorial entities and ministries. There are different actors that are contributing to these projects that are technically and financially viable. Then there's the financing offer that is composed of different sources, cooperation organizations, public sources, philanthropy, in order to be able to mobilize these financial records to supplement our NDCs and a support ecosystem in case we don't have mature projects with the incubators and the accelerators. We can strengthen the capabilities of these projects so that they become more feasible. But this has to do with public banking and private resources. So we just want to keep on working on our financial organization. These are the implementary mechanisms for other initiatives existing in the countries. We are currently betting on creating the necessary investments at the territorial level right now. We are working with the Bogota Chamber of Commerce because they are our partners in the field, because they have the technical capabilities in the field to be able to partner with other actors in order to mobilize resources bottoms up, as we were saying in Brazil. And these are very important challenges because at the national level, with the regional nodes, we have a gap in terms of communication, in terms of operations, logistics capabilities, technical capabilities. And we've also achieved the different territories in order to discuss these issues that we know in the territory, but it's sometimes very hard to keep on moving forward in this. So these are the main challenges. Thank you very much for the attention.
So that is a great question. Like, how can we interconnect the communities at the sub-regional level so that they can access this financing? So I think that the mechanisms of the corridor are very valuable in this type of process. Thank you very much, Claudia, for participating. I would like to now give the floor to Fernando Salazar. Fernando, can you share with us the work of UNEP 5? What were the regional obstacles that you have found for the effective mobilization of the blended finance, and what practices you can share about on public-private associations? Thank you. Thank you for these. Thank you for inviting me. Before discussing blended financing, I wanted to show what we do in UNEP 5. This is a UN body, and we want to share with you how we work. We work purely with the financing sector, that's banks, insurance companies, and we want to explain at the strategic level what can companies do in their corporate strategies regarding transition to climate change. And we want them to know other stakeholders in the system and standards. This is the network. These are banks that have acceded to our principles, and we work with them on governance and other products like the blended financing. And We are right now in the COP30 year, and we see that there's great mobilization. You see here at the left is the regulatory and supervision environment, and then we have sustainable finance and industry stakeholders working, signing commitments and executing agreements. And of course, where we see these issues, we see opportunities to improve practices, to de-escalate climate risk, and we are providing support to these stakeholders. And these public-private alliances that Paula was mentioning, we can see the representation of the banks on the right side. This is an example from Mexico, and this is necessary to facilitate investments in transition. Another case could be the example of blended finance, project finance. From UNEP FI, we provide support to this financial ecosystem. Climate financing in the region has increased in the last years, but forecasts establish we'll need 73 billions, and those are the ones that were mobilized in 2022. McKinsey says that we have to mobilize about 700 million. So 700 billion. So we have to multiply this by 10. This is a trending mechanism, and we can see the risk profile reduction. Our colleagues from Brazil discussed some of the country platforms. This is the value chain of blended financing and de-risking, and they have a key role for the bankability of projects. We have the phase of construction or development stage, the de-risking stage, and the funding stage. And contractual schemes can assist us in the de-risking, and the last stage, the funding stage, can allow us to attract different investors to collaborate in projects such as those of infrastructure that need a mobilizing or capex that is very large. All the climate projects face many risks, not only at the political or technical or commercial level, but there's also the risk related to the structuring of dividing these risks between the different stakeholders, and this can help agilize and mobilize capital so that we don't only have a transformation at the level of technological development, but also at the level of market opportunities. In the blended finance in Latin America, we see that there is an innovation potential, a co-financing potential to attract private financing. And here I will be sharing some examples. For instance, the IDB Invest for the Inter-American Development Bank. There are different structures, for instance, by tracts, by loans, but with different contractual conditions, so that we can have different investors join this blended financing and to mobilize capital, and that this capital mobilization can have different forms. It's different types of products and services. In the essence of time, I will not be talking in depth about this topic, but I want to share this example. It's a case study in the region of blended financing with mixed financing or blended financing, as I mentioned. This has an increasing footprint in the region, and we are providing support to this type of engagement from UNEP FI. So this was just a brief introduction of how there can be some approaches in our type of investment.
Very interesting to hear about the challenges of this blended finance that also has to do with the role of climatic institutions in implementing um, this public partnership for financing. Thank you very much. And Selene, that is Selene Orozco, now from the Ministry of Environment in Panama. So it's like the cherry on top for this panel. And I wanted to discuss something with you that I believe it's pretty relevant and interesting that Panama has been working on. And it is this whole strategy of aligning the Rio Convention, the CDP, and the desertification convention. So I would like to hear a bit more about what you've done in order to come to an agreement and to have a single voice in aligning these three strategies and conventions and articulate that through a single plan. What are the challenges that you faced in doing so? And how have you involved the communities that are somehow affected or impacted both negatively and positively by these actions? So, would you share a bit about Panama's experience, what you've been doing, and what has been the role that you've had from the Ministry of the Environment? Good morning. Thank you very much for the invite to this webinar. Yeah, right now, for a couple of years now, we've been working on this Nature Plus initiative called Panama Pact for the Nature. And for us, the alignment of the different conventions has been great. We have moved from a siloed convention coordination to truly intersectoral and intergovernmental governance. What does that mean? For us, it was key and important than through a decree law in the case of Panama. Um, the Strategic Government Plan, IPC, created this strategic umbrella with nature, integrating the different targets of all three conventions in a single national plan, thus promoting articulate work on the part of every private and public stakeholders. So in this regulatory framework that includes all institution sectors, we have been able to move forward with this alignment. And right now, we are currently developing the Framework Climate Change and Green Transition Act. And for climate change governance and sustainability, as part of these projects, we are proposing the creation of a national climate, biodiversity, and land committee that we'll call CONACLAVIR. And that conceived as an institutional body, inclusive with the representation of every single institution, sector, and key actors, so that we can come to an agreement regarding all the technical criteria, assigning those responsibilities, approving all shared indicators, unifying and replacing the current climate change, desertification, and biodiversity committees that have been working, as I said, in silos or separately, and the focal points that attend these three different committees are the same. So we saw that opportunity in order to set up one single national committee for climate, biodiversity, and land, with the participation of every single focal point from the different sectors that are currently contributing to the preparation of the NDCs, and regarding the efforts of the country to reduce emissions. And we believe that once the act is approved, we're going to be able to centralize on coordination, avoid the application of efforts in order to have a consistent action and joint actions overcoming this fragmentation and the regular operation of the committee and the existence of different focal points. In addition to that, for us, it's been key to have intersectoral organization that also goes hand in hand with the strengthening the technical capabilities of all teams. We need more teams working cross-sectionally on climate change, biodiversity, water management, and forestry authorities. And we believe that in that regard, it's essential to keep on working on continuous training, on to make sure that all the technical teams have all the necessary tools, and to strengthen internal knowledge management systems. In parallel, We also need to include all the territories. What does that mean? Transferring those technical capabilities to the indigenous peoples, the local governments, and African descendants in order for them to create, validate, and report their own data so that they can be part of the national process with this twofold approach of technical coordination and territorial empowerment to develop unified instruments, shared indicators, and integrated projects that can guarantee tangible results. Is also extremely important to align all the financial flows because the Panama Pact with nature, and we also have the target of turning these three global agendas into one integrated action. And all the public-private investments must be classified based on their simultaneous contribution, whether it is mitigation, adaptation, conservation, restoration, as long as there is a monitoring system in order to monitor these resources and identify the gaps based on the three Rio Conventions. And of course, also decentralizing the funds equitably with a gender lens and an intercultural approach so that they can reach the local governments, indigenous communities, and all the vulnerable populations in the country so that the funding gets to the territory and creates this climate, biodiversity, and land benefits while making sure that the financial flows are no longer fragmented and becomes the driver for this integrated, transparent, and high impact action. So for us, it has been extremely important to conduct this exercise. We are currently in the process of identifying all the different challenges, the gaps, and for us, the transparency framework in Panama has also proven important. It's been a great key catalyzer to enhance climate governance across the country. And we also have the development of the National Platform of Climate Transparency, we call it PNTC, with 8 integrated modules that allow us to manage all this climate information in a structured, traceable, and accessible to all stakeholders and society at large, and that not only has favored the compliance with the commitments of the Paris Agreement, but has also enhanced the national standards in terms of accountability, strategic planning, and climate financing. For instance, every module connects with the others in order to create this continuous information cycle, and they are fed back with different sectorial data, and they feed the NDC in order to show that progress on mitigation issues. And simultaneously, there's also the module of the national actions that record all the different policies and actions, and the module of the implementation mechanisms links every action of this technology and capability building, and so on and so forth. And the monitoring and evaluation model work as feedback, a continuous feedback system in the PNTC that creates maps, indexes, and indicators that are created in order to review the different territories and define the necessary indicators to measure it. And there's also a knowledge module that compiles and publishes all the information, data flows, and distributes it across all important actors, the youth, the academia, etc. And to consolidate transparency, it's been extremely important to have institutional agreements that are robust, that allow to maximize the potential with the different modules, guaranteeing that all the information flows in an integrated manner to feed the decision-making processes. And for that, we're currently going through the second phase of the civil project, and transparency has also played a very important role in these reporting mechanisms that has been a key enabler for climate action that helps us to have more effective coordination with all the institutions and sectors for the preparation of NDCs. We understand that we face some persisting challenges. We must still get to close those technology and technical gaps that hinder full participation by some community stakeholders in monitoring mechanisms and everything that has to do with governance mechanisms and the need to strengthen all these mechanisms for information dissemination. So we are working to make sure that we can work jointly with society at large and with all stakeholders in order to guarantee the implementation of NDCs in a much more effective and faster manner. Thank you so much. That was great. That was a lot of information. What you're doing in Panama is extremely interesting. What you said about the transparency frameworks and how we can further strengthen that articulation mechanism so that we can make informed decisions on that and all the information that you are conveying. I want to highlight also the message of empowering the communities, training them so that they can actually become involved adequately in every one of these processes that are extremely hard to understand. So thank you very much, Selene, for your participation. And I would like to apologize to our audience because we are a little beyond schedule. So I just want to ask you for 5 more minutes so that we can wrap up our webinar. On my part, I only need to thank our panelists for their participation. We at NDC Action, the project that I coordinate for Latin America and the Caribbean, we are eager to pursue these in-depth conversations in order to share these experiences with other countries because our purpose is to continue to assist the countries in the region in dynamizing these issues through the strengthening of climate finding. And to wrap up, I would like to give the floor to Sebastián Carranza, who's our regional coordinator for climate change at UNEP in the Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. That is going to share a couple of closing remarks about this session. So, Sebastián, thank you very much. Welcome. The pleasure is all mine. I just wanted to thank every one of you. I want to thank all the speakers. And I want to thank the over 200 persons that had joined us for this webinar. So I would like to reiterate our thanks to Nadia, James, Enrico for their presentations, Claudia, Fernando, and Selene for the excellent information they've shared. I believe it was a pretty interesting balance in terms of governance and climate institutions in Latin America and the Caribbean. Particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, we need financial, economic, that translates particularly in contributing to sustainability throughout time and having this continuous improvement approach. We heard several of the speakers say not only UNEP, but the whole United Nations system is supporting that, and they are contributing on having further sophistication in climate change risks, biography, and very specific risks. So we currently have a sector of prioritization of these climate policies, particularly in terms of financing gap. I believe that the examples of Colombia with the National Climate Financing Strategy, the Climate Corridor, Fernando also shared some very important examples of these new structures that are emerging throughout the region, both private and public, multilateral as well. And of course, blended finance as one of the catalyzers in order to have more suitable instruments. And Selene, as you said it, and that was a perfect cherry on top as and they said when they presented you for those of us that are here in Panama, and we are extremely proud. And we're going to be happy to meet in person to hear a little bit more about these important steps that Panama is taken. I would like to thank everyone that shared the experiences from Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia as well. And finally, I want to wrap up by saying that this is an effort of the coalition of the United Nations, managed by the 21 agencies that have a presence in the region, UNEP particularly. And this is the first of 5 webinars. We're going to be having 4 further webinars before the COP, and it's going to be great to have every one of you, and of course to have more attendees. So please spread the word. And thank you very much, Paola. Thank you, Carla, for their facilitation. No, thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, every one of our attendees. And we just want to remind you that we're going to be sharing the link with the presentations and the link with the recording via email. Thank you very much for participating and for attending. And one more thing, very quickly, I would love to take a group picture. So if everyone could open their cameras for a second. Thank you very much. See you all soon.